we're going to go to Panama. Now, this, unlike some of the other places I've taken you to, is not quite as remote or as difficult to get to. It's only a 2-hour direct flight from Miami, and you'll arrive in Panama City and be whisked to your lodge, and you can immediately start birding. It sounds pretty good now. If we could ever start traveling again, some of you guys might get down there. We are now journeying to Panama. We went in April of 2019, and this is the end of, supposedly the end of the wet season, the green season as they call it. Unfortunately, they were in the midst of a drought, which I'll explain a little bit more because it did affect things. The participants are myself and my husband, Barry Cooper, 2 friends from England, Tony Quinn and Peter Colston, and we went to the Canopy Tower, the Canopy Camp, and we spent a day and a half in Nasagundi at the Gunayala, which is the Kuna Indian indigenous area for some special birds. I should say that we've been to Panama 2 times before, but what prompted us to go this time was that in the Darién, where the Canopy Camp is located, there were active nests of both Harpy Eagle and Crested Eagle, which is the 2nd largest raptor in the Americas. And they're birds that we had wanted to see for years. And so this was our reason for going this time. Here are the participants. There's a motley crew. Tony on the left, myself, Peter Colston, and Barry on the right. I'll show you where we went. The Canopy Tower, which is where we started, is in Nia National Park, which is outside Panama City, on the canal, in the canal zone, or what used to be the canal zone. Whereas the Canopy Camp is in the Darién province in far eastern Panama. The other lodge, which is run by the same group, is a Canopy Lodge, which we didn't visit, although I believe it's one of the places that hopefully the MOS trip will get to. So keep your fingers crossed, because it's quite an upscale, fancy place. This is the famous Canopy Tower. It has an interesting history. It was built in 1965 as a US Army radar installation and was used by the Army for monitoring air traffic, particularly drug traffic, in Panama until about 1995, and then it was abandoned. In 1996, Raul Arias de Pará, who's a Panamanian businessman, but also a birder and also a lover of natural history, acquired it and about 35 acres of property around it, and converted it from this rather derelict structure to this eco lodge. It's on the highest hill in the national park, and as such has a wonderful view over the forest. You stand here on the upper platform and you can actually reach out and touch the canopy trees. So it's quite a wonderful place to observe birds. It has a sort of an odd configuration because of course it's a cylinder, and but this is a dining area. Dining is very upscale, wine at dinner and so forth. The rooms are rather odd and wedge shaped, but very comfortable. And I'll take you through the morning. We arrived in the afternoon and were taken to the tower and did a little birding, but our friends arrived after dark. And the next morning we were up at dawn and looking out over the forest, listening to the Howler Monkeys waking us up. They have tea and coffee up on the platform for you in the morning. And we're out there starting to look for birds. The gentleman on the left is Carlos Bethencourt. He was our guide for most of the trip. He's the senior guide at the Canopy Camp and Tower, and is an excellent birder. I mean, you know, when you go on these trips down to the Canopy Tower, Lodge, or Camp, you don't really need to go with field guides or vent or rock jumper, because their guides that they have there are every bit as good, and it's included with your costs of staying there. So no sense having the added expense of a tour company. So we're standing up here looking for birds, and in the distance is the Panama Canal. Now, I'm going to say a little bit about the canal because it's quite important to the integrity of the forest. The canal relies on fresh water to operate the locks. Every ship that goes through a lock uses about 50 million gallons of fresh water. And the fresh water comes from the forest that surrounds the canal on both sides. The national park, there's another national park, Camino de las Cruces, to the south of Soberania. And then on the west side of the canal is Barra Colorado Island, and then a very large hydrologic regime. And this has been excellent for the natural history of the area, but it's strictly a byproduct of the canal. If the canal were not there, it's undoubted that all this forest would have been long since converted to agriculture or some other use. The national park that the Canopy Camp Tower is in is about 55,000 acres. The first bird you're going to see undoubtedly is going to be a palm tanager, and it's going to come right up to you and probably try to take some of your breakfast from you because they're very tame. But other birds that you'll see from the top of the tower include the green shrike vireo. It's a large, bright green vireo. It has a call like a greater yellowlegs and very easy to hear, but not so easy to see in the green leaves. Broad-billed motmot is also seen from the top of the tower. A very tiny bird, about the size of a kinglet, is the black-headed toady flycatcher, very cute little critter. Gray-green tanager. Lesser greenlet, this is a common bird. It's a tiny vireo, about the size of a Carolina chickadee. Plain tanager, one of the few Tangara tanagers that actually has no color other than gray and black. And you'll get some larger birds. They put fruit out on the branches of the trees, and it attracts birds like this collared aracari, and it also attracts mammals like this Jeffrey's tamarin. It's a very cute monkey with a little mohawk. Since the tower is on the highest hill in the park, it sets up a very nice thermal for raptors, and you'll get not only the resident raptors like this gray-headed kite, but you'll get migrants like Mississippi kite. And in fact, while we were there, there was a huge passage of Mississippi kites. Every day we would see thousands of them in huge whirling flocks above us. And this is just from the tower. These are all Mississippi kites, and that's a small flock. We had some that were over 6,000 birds. The tower also maintains a number of hummingbird feeders down at ground level, and you can see some beautiful birds like this white-necked Jacobin, blue-throated hummingbird, violet-bellied hummingbird, and white-vented pulmotier are all common visitors to the sugar water there. The road up the hill is called Semaphore Road, and it's good birding, although we didn't spend a lot of time on it, but we did find a pair of black and white owls roosting off the road. It's not a very good picture, but that's as close as we could get, but I think you can see them. They're a large owl about the size of a barred owl. Now, the Canopy Tower is also a jumping off spot for visiting a number of excellent birding areas, including one of the top birding sites in the Americas, the Pipeline Road. So the first full day, we started to visit some of these areas. And this gives you a little bit of an idea. This is the canal, Gatun Lake. This is the Pacific side. It's counterintuitive, but down here is the Pacific, and this is the Caribbean up here. Here's the Canopy Tower, and we visited Summit Ponds and Summit Gardens, Old Gamboa Road, Ammo Dump Ponds, and then the Pipeline Road, which winds its way northwest up to Gatun Lake. First site was Old Gamboa Road. We're out there. It's a secondary growth area, but it has a lot of good forest, and you get birds like lance-tailed manakin, rosy thrush tanager. That bird is its only bird in its family, by the way. So if you're like me, a collector of bird families, I still have 10 to get of all the bird families in the world. That was one you really wanted to see. This is a black-chested jay. And another bird, which you might have seen in Texas, but it's very common throughout the Americas, is the clay-colored thrush. We did see some mammals. This strange object is a two-toed sloth, or Hoffman's two-toed sloth. It's the only one we saw on this trip. This is the front end, and that's the hind end. And that's the best picture we could get. From Old Gamboa Road, we went to Summit Ponds, a nice wetland area, quite famous for its boat-billed herons. It's almost a slam dunk that you're going to see boat-billed herons there, as well as American pygmy kingfisher, greater ani, a very strange bird, and there's a colony of lesser kiskadees there as well. Proceeding onward, we cross Chagres Lake, and at that point, we're running right alongside the canal. You can see a cruise ship and a container vessel going through. And one of the most common birds right along the canal is the tropical kingbird. They're everywhere on the wires. You don't even try to count them. You just tick them on your log in the evening. Before you get to the actual park, you pass a salubriously named place called Ammo Dump Pond. And it is a place where in World War II, they did dump used or spent ammunition. But it's all been cleaned up and rehabilitated, and it's quite a good wetland area. You can see things such as rufescent tiger heron, or in this case, purple gallinule. But moving onward, you get to the real pièce de résistance is the pipeline road. Now, the pipeline road has an interesting history. During World War II, the US government built an oil pipeline from Gatun Lake all the way to Panama City, or rather to Gamboa on the canal, because they anticipated during the war that the canal might be blocked or rendered useless. And this was a way to transport fuel from one side of the isthmus to another. Well, as it turned out, the canal was never blocked during the war. The pipe was built, 17 miles of it, and never used. But the service road has been maintained for ecotourism ever since. So it is one of the great birding roads of the world. You've got 17 miles of birding, and you can go for it. This is pretty much what it looks like. It's primary rainforest. You go in and you're sort of deep in the jungle, so to speak. A lot of super emergent trees like this giant fig tree, and quite a few nice birds. The time we were there, I alluded to this a little bit. It was supposed to be the green season. There was supposed to be, when we were in the green season before, we got rain in the afternoon for maybe an hour or two, and everything was pretty active, a lot of fruit, a lot of flowers, a lot of ant swarms. When we arrived, they were in the middle of a drought. They hadn't had any rain for 6 weeks. Everything was very droopy, and it actually had affected the operation of the canal because, as I said, it needs fresh water, and they had to restrict the size of some of the vessels going through the locks. But we persevered, and we got some nice birds like black-breasted puffbird, black-throated trogon, this is a male, gartered trogon, another male, a nice pair of white-whiskered puffbirds, rufous motmot, great jacamar, and crimson-crested woodpecker. This is a Campephalus woodpecker. It's the same genus as the ivory-bill woodpecker, so it's larger than our pileated woodpecker. There's also a lot of small birds, but we didn't see as many small birds as we normally would have expected. We didn't have any large bird flocks, for example, which was a bit of a disappointment, but we persevered. This is a black-crowned antshrike, dot-winged ant wren. These are little antbird things, and a very cute little southern bentbill, very appropriately named small flycatcher about the size of an empid. But one of the things we had been missing was ant swarms. You know, if you've been to the tropics and you've seen army ant swarms, you'll know that they're followed by obligate antbirds, which don't feed on the ants, but they feed on the insects and other small organisms that are flushed by the ants as they spread out to hunt. And the last couple of times we were in Panama, we had a lot of ant swarms, a lot of activity. Some of these swarms were the size of like a you know, half a football field in size. I mean, just amazing, crossing the road and dozens of birds. And this time we were looking for ants everywhere. We're asking everyone, have you seen an ant swarm? Have you seen an ant swarm? And finally somebody said, well, there's a little one in the woods. So we all went in and we did find the ants. These are army ants, of course. The large individual here is a soldier, and these are the workers. And they fan out every morning from a bivouac and bring back food, tear the insects they capture apart and feed to their young, which are in a nest, usually in the roots of a stilt palm. So luckily we were able to catch up with some of the obligate antbirds. One of them is a gray-headed tanager. Notice this one is banded. Bicolored antbird, spotted antbird, and the most interesting unique looking one, the ocellated antbird. If you just bird along the road, you'll see a lot of birds foraging on the leaves. Short-billed pigeon is usually way up in the trees, but we managed to see this individual foraging on the ground, and we were lucky to see a streaked, or sometimes called spectacle, antpitta also foraging right along the side of the road, which is a pretty unusual sight. Also got mammals, quadrimundis. This is a three-toed sloth and a brown-throated three-toed sloth, and they're a little more common than the two-toed sloths. White capuchin monkey, mantled howler monkey, and of course you'll see a few interesting small critters like these leafcutter ants, which, as you know, take the leaves underground to their nests, chew them up, and they're used as to grow fungus to feed the young. Some interesting vegetation. I just took some pictures of some of the more interesting seed pods. This is from a super emergent tree. I'm not sure what species. This is a seed of the quipo, which is the national tree of Panama. And it's not a ceiba tree, but it looks like a ceiba, and is the tree most favored by harpy eagles to nest because it's the largest tree in Panama. After 3 days, well, 3.5 days, we left the Canopy Tower and headed east, or southeast rather, to the Darién. And en route, we stopped at Serra Azul. Now, Serra Azul is a mountain about 3,000 feet high, about 35 minutes from Panama City. And it's a bit of a bedroom community for wealthy Panamanians. A lot of expat Americans live up there. It's a gated community. You have to pass through a guarded gate to get in there, a lot of fancy homes. So we went in, and if you go through past all the fancy homes, you end up at the Mirador Atalaya, which is their reserve, and it's excellent birding here. Unfortunately, it started to rain when we arrived, so we didn't stay too long. We did see some nice birds, like this golden hooded tanager and a spotted wood creeper. But then we retired to the porch of some local expat Americans, the Harrisons, who live there, and they maintain one of the most elaborate hummingbird feeder setups I've ever seen, and most confusing. This, whoops, let me go back. So as you can see, a little bit overwhelming, but you do see birds like crowned wood nymph and bronze-tailed plumeteer and snowy-bellied hummingbird there. They also maintain fruit feeders, and so you have a little basket of goodies here, like the crimson-backed tanager on the right and the red-legged honeycreepers on the left, the males and the green females. Shining honeycreeper, male and female, closer up of the red-legged. Green honeycreeper, bay-headed tanager, all of those at their feeders. So moving on, we tootled on down east, southeast, towards the Darién and stopped at Toltai, which is a small town, to eat lunch at a certain restaurant that every birder who goes to the Darién stops at, because they maintain a number of hummingbird feeders, and because they're in an area of sort of mixed agriculture and lowland scrub dry forest, they get species different than we would see in the Darién or earlier at the tower, like black-throated mango and scaly-breasted hummingbird. However, in due course, we arrive at the Canopy Camp. Now, the Canopy Camp is what you would call glamping. You have this open area here that has, the dining area, relaxation area, hammocks, and so forth and so on. There's hummingbird feeders around. But you yourself stay in a tent. It's a tented camp built on about the same idea as the tented camps in Africa. This is our tent that we had, number 3. You have your own observation deck. It's quite luxurious inside, has ensuite, well, not ensuite, it's a little building right here next to your tent with hot water, showers, and all the amenities that you should want. And from your deck, this is our deck looking out. That's a quipo tree. It's a super emergent tree. We can just sit there and look out into the forest. Now, the Canopy Camp is in Matete. It's not in the Darién National Park. It's adjacent to a 65,000 acre hydrologic reserve, and it's about 45 minutes from the last town on the Pan American Highway, where it ends at the Darién Gap, and then beyond that is the national park. So it's surrounded on several sides by indigenous people, and Bara people have their indigenous communities. So it's quite an interesting area to stay. From our tent, we could see things like keel-billed toucans, and around the camp, thick-billed euphonia and hummingbird feeders. This is a long-billed starthroat. It's the only time we saw this species. Now, the Canopy Camp, again, is a jumping off area for visiting certain parts of the Darién province. We visited 2 Mbara indigenous villages, Alto Playona and Nueva, should be Vigia village, and then Darién National Park itself, and then an area called El Salto. Alto Playona is where the Crested Eagle nest had been located. And we were told that we had to go there immediately because the young bird had fledged and was only visiting the nest occasionally. And every day that passed would be less chance that we would see it. So off we went the very next morning. Here's a map, I'll just show you that. Here's where the Canopy Camp is located. The indigenous areas are here, Mbara area, all here. And this is another area. And here's the park. This is the end of the Pan American Highway. This line here is the border with Colombia. So this is Colombia over here. And this is where the Harpy Eagle was located. And this is El Salto, which is, I'll explain a little later, an interesting area we visited. We started off at Alto Playana. We hired a local guide. Here's a gentleman with his machete and his Swarovski binoculars. Off to the Crested Eagle nest. We hit the sign that says, don't do anything here, no playback, no cutting of trees, no bothering the birds, no tossing of garbage. And we're watching you with cameras. These are very high-tech Indians down there. En route, a semi-plumbeous hawk posed for a while. And then we got to the Crested Eagle nest, and they had a sort of a blind set up with banana leaves, and we were setting up our telescopes, and we're looking out at the empty nest, no bird. So we're all standing around saying, oh, what do? We're going to go away, come back, you know, whatever, wait a little while longer. And finally it flew in, and that's the young Crested Eagle, which I think looks somewhat like a Viking helmet at that point. The young of the Crested and the Harpy Eagles are white, and they're large eagles. As I said, this is the second largest eagle in the Americas. And I'm not sure if anybody knows why they're white. It may have something to do with temperature regulation. And coming back from seeing the eagle up to the truck, which was parked on the road, we had these migrants pass us. Now, I don't know if you've been following the news, but starting about 2 years ago, there started to be a large influx of migrants from Africa arriving in Colombia and crossing through the Darién Gap, many of them not making it because it's a very treacherous area. There are no roads, of course, and just trails. And coming out into Panama with hopes, of course, of reaching the United States. We passed dozens of these individuals on the road, and they would ask us, you know, parlez-vous français, because most of them had come from Congo or Cameroon or former French possessions. But the young kids had all picked up Spanish because many of them had been on the road for almost 2 months, and they explained their journeys. They took ships from Africa to Brazil even, or Colombia, and then made their way to the Colombian border, paid coyotes to supposedly take them across into Panama. A lot of them were just dumped into the Darién jungle. And when they got to Panama, they would walk this road and get to the village, Alto Playona, and they would meet the Panamanian authorities, who took everybody's information, gave them little medical checkups, and then put them on a bus to Costa Rica. So I don't know what happened when they got to Costa Rica, but that all shut down with the pandemic. And now there are very large migrant camps in the indigenous areas, and it is causing some issues down there. So just a digression from birds, but it does show that other things are happening in the world. So the next day we go to Nuevo Vigia village, and we're going to take a trip down this river to look for some unusual birds. But before we do the river trip, we find a few local species that are of interest, like this extremely bizarre bare-headed antbird and red-bill sicklebill or scythebill, and plain-breasted martin. Getting on the boat, we're heading down river, wattled jacana, ring kingfisher, gray-barred hawk, lots of things sitting along the river, savanna hawk, rufescent tiger heron, black-capped Donacobius, another species that's the only individual in its family. They used to think it was a wren, then they thought it was related to mockingbirds, and now they realize it's a unique bird in its own family. Also royal flycatcher, not showing his crest. I've never seen one with a crest up except in photos. Mangrove swallow, and even a brown basilisk lizard. And these are also known as Jesus Christ lizards because they can run across the water. I've seen them do it, but we couldn't convince this one to do it. He didn't want to leave his log. we get to this area at the end of the boat trip. It's a little farm that seems to be mostly characterized by a large number of dead trees, and our target was there, the dusky bat jacamar. It's a species only found in this very small area of Panama. And another nice bird there, the spot-breasted woodpecker. And that was Tuesday. On Wednesday, the entire complement of the Canopy Camp is going off to see the Harpy Eagle. And the reason that everyone went at the same time was so to reduce any disturbance to the birds, obviously. So we had drove to the end of the road at Yavitsa is where the end of the road is. We got on these boats or these canoes and go downriver, starting before dawn. And dawn is gradually coming up, and we're continuing downriver. Everybody's looking for birds, but we're moving at a pretty good clip. And we get to another small river and turn up it, and then stop at a village called El Real. Now, El Real has to be the end of everything, because there's nothing beyond that except the Darién Gap and the Darién National Park. So we disembark here. They load us into some beaten up old pickup trucks and drive us as far as they can drive us, and they dump us on some sort of a trail, and off we go. And we walk for about 2 miles, and they feed us. And then we cross this little stream over here, and we walk for about another mile, and we come to this rather impressive sign. Be quiet, the Harpy Eagle is here. So we were concerned. We knew the chick had not fledged, so there would be a chick in the nest, but we were told that the adults were only coming in about every day to feed the chick, and then only staying for an hour or two. So the chances of seeing an adult were pretty slim. But one of the guides went up ahead of us and told us to wait here. He came running back in great excitement and said the female is at the nest feeding the chick. So we all crept up very quietly. And here's this immense quipo tree with this immense nest. And in the immense nest in the middle is a female Harpy Eagle, which is the largest eagle in the world, and her chick. And they have a sort of a blind set up, and you can sit and watch. So here's the eagle and the chick. She was feeding the chick a very unfortunate kinkajou, which is a small relative of the raccoon. We did eventually determine what he was eating. I have a little video. It's not a great one because I took it handheld through a telescope, but there you are. You can get an idea of the female feeding the chick. And then the eagle flew right over us, and it's not a great picture. Eleazar, one of the guides, took it on his cell phone, but I wanted to show it anyway, because if you look at the feet of this eagle, the wrists of the female Harpy Eagle are as big as a man's wrist, and the hind talon is longer than that of a grizzly bear. So get an idea that this is a fairly impressive bird. Anyway, somewhat less impressive, but nice to see. On the way back, we saw a few nice birds. This is a gray-cheeked nunlet, a black orapendula, which is one of the indigenous species or endemic species of the area. It's also found in Colombia, but this is the only place in Panama it's found. And orapendulas are giant orioles, or giant cousins of the oriole, and they also build a hanging nest in a colony. So there's the adult up here, and here are the nests. In the vicinity was a red-throated caracara, which is a falcon. Actually, caracaras are aberrant falcons, but they're scavengers. So he's probably scavenging around the nests of the orapendula. At that point, Carlos had to leave us. He had business in Panama City. So we took a new guide, Eleazar Madrid, and he also is excellent. All the guides are wonderful down there. And this is Eleazar. And he took us the next day to Quebrada Felix. Now, Quebrada Felix is primary rainforest. It's dominated by these quipo trees. You can see it's the dry season for them, at least. It's not the wet season. None of them have any leaves. The quipo is a very interesting rainforest tree. It doesn't really have buttress roots. It has this very swollen base and these little funny, almost like feet sticking out. Because the forest was so open, there's so little leaves on the tree, we saw a lot of very good birds. White hawk, for one, a displaying crested or pendula. They lean forward and then they make a gurgling note like someone pouring water from a jug. White-tailed trogon, whooping mott-mott. I've never heard it whoop, so I have no idea what it sounds like. Yellow-rumped cacique. But eventually we entered the wetter part of the forest to the stream called Quebrada Felix, or the happy stream, lucky stream. I saw a couple of interesting birds here. Little tinamou, which had been a blocker for me for years. A blocker is a British term, means bird that you've tried to see many, many times, have heard many, many times, I've never actually laid eyes on. And we're standing here and a couple came out of the forest and walked right in front of us into the woods. It was amazing, but no one had enough presence of mind to take a photograph. We also had a number of northern water thrushes here, which is one of the places they winter. However, that was not our target. This was our target. The black-capped Antpitta, or as it's now known, the black-capped pitosoma. It's not an Antpitta. They've done DNA and found that it's really most closely related to a group called the gnat catchers, which are generally very small ground-dwelling birds, which this thing stands over a foot tall and is not small and is quite aggressive, actually. This bird was very interested in us and came right up to us, and we managed to get all sorts of pictures. And it's a bird I really wanted to see for a long time. It's a very impressive bird. And some other nice birds around there, common patoo, purple-throated fruit crow, which is not a crow at all, it's a cotinga. A black antshrike, not a beautiful bird, but a very rare bird. And the last full day there, we went to this road called the El Salto Road. Now, on the map, there's a town of El Salto. We took the road all the way to the end where it ends at the river, and there are power lines going up there, but there is, I can guarantee you, no town of El Salto. There may be a house up there, but we didn't even see that. But it's a wonderful birding road through this sort of secondary growth that has somewhat different species of birds than you find in the primary forest, such as pied puffbird, roadside hawk, and fork-tailed flycatcher. But this was our last day in the Darién, and we had had a very hard day the day before with the Harpy Eagle, so we were really kind of tired. So we're driving out very slowly. Eleazar's driving, and we're sort of half dozing in the back of the truck when he suddenly puts the brakes on and he says, "I thought I saw a really big raptor sitting by the side of the road. Let's just get out and walk back." So we didn't know what to expect. He didn't know what to expect. So we got out, didn't slam any doors, tiptoed back, and this was sitting by the side of the road. This is a adult female dark phase crested eagle, which is the bird's over 3 feet from top to bottom, and it's the second largest raptor in the Americas, and the females, of course, are larger than the males, and the dark phase is extremely rare. And here it was just sitting by the road. I mean, it's the kind of thing that sometimes happens in birding, but you never expect it. So anyway, we watched her for quite a while, and she sort of looked at us, but didn't seem to care. So mostly looking around for food. Notice they have a single crest, whereas the Harpy Eagle, their close relative, has 2 crests. And then she flew off. And I just want to show you another seed pod. I call this a weaponized maple pod. And a spaghetti palm. So let's just talk about deforestation a little bit. Even though this area is protected and has a lot of indigenous area, which the indigenous peoples protect, there is a considerable amount of deforestation going on, primarily for agriculture, cattle ranching, and also teak plantations. Which surprised us. We passed through miles and miles of teak plantations on the Salto Road, for example, and it was a little disturbing. So this is an example of what you're running into down there. Raul is trying to build a more conservation-minded mindset, I guess, amongst the people down there, and trying to establish more ecotourism. So hopefully that will proceed. Anyway, we left the Canopy Camp and drove for several hours through smoke from forest fires. And it wasn't forest fires like the Amazon, where they were deliberately set to clear land, but they were accidentally set during this extreme drought by people who had just been burning rubbish and so forth, and they had gotten away from them, but the destruction was the same. So anyway, we are now up at Nasagundi. Nasagundi's on the Caribbean slope. The Kuna Indians control this area, and actually to go in, you have to show a passport. So it's like an enclave within the nation of Panama. If you continue to the coast, they have a very active tourist set up with scuba diving, snorkeling, the beautiful beaches apparently. But we weren't there for that sort of thing. So we stayed just within the reserve at this really nice lodge. It's owned by a Kuna Indian family, the Adamises, and it's Garduck Lodge. It looks rustic. It is rustic, but you have ensuite bathrooms, you have excellent food, and there's excellent birding right around there. The place we went first was the Sendero, the notorious Sendero Ibar, the Ibar Trail, which goes straight up and straight down, or maybe straight down and straight up. But you're going from one particular bird, and that's this one. And this is the apayoa. Now, the apayoa is another one of these birds. It's the only species in its entire family. This is a family that only has one species in it. And for many years, no one knew what a apayoa was related to. Was it a mannequin related to mannequins? Was it a flycatcher? And they finally did DNA analysis, and they found that its closest relatives are the broadbills of Asia, but it's not closely enough related to be in their family, but it's the closest thing to it. So, me collecting families of birds, it was another family added, and we were all very happy to see it. It's a small bird about the size of a wood pewee. And some other nice birds like blue-fronted parrotlet, rufous-winged tanager, and rufous mourner were seen in the same area. And we had a big passage of swallowtail kites too the next morning. Beautiful swallowtail kites. Now, the Kuna Indians are noted for the molas. This is this reverse applique embroidery, and all of these were done by, our guide there was Yarasol Adamas. She's a young lady that is learning to be a bird guide. She's pretty good on the birds. Her English is okay. Certainly can show you the birds there. And anyway, all of this was done by her mother. And we bought this one here because we thought, well, maybe if we buy it, we'll get to see the rufous-vented ground cuckoo. And here's Yarasol's mom with the mola that she did. And she's dressed in the traditional Kuna Indian costume. So the next day, we were picked up by somebody from the Canopy Camp, Canopy Tower rather, and taken back to the Canopy Tower just in time for supper. The next day, we were supposed to go to the Canopy Lodge for one day, specifically to look for the rufous-vented ground cuckoo. One had been being seen around there fairly regularly, and Carlos was going to take us. But when we arrived back at the tower, we got a little bit of bad news. Well, quite a bit of bad news. Carlos, not paying any attention to the signs that are plastered everywhere inside the tower to hang on to the railings going up and down the metal stairs, had not done so and had fallen down the stairs and broken his leg. So he was in the hospital, and that meant that they were one guide short, and so no one could drive us to the lodge. So the next day we simply did the Pipeline Road again, which was fine, but we didn't really see anything new. And it was just one of those unfortunate incidents. But if you do go to the Canopy Tower, please, when you climb the stairs, hang on to the railings. Let it be a lesson to you. Anyway, the last day, we're up at dawn again, up on the tower, having our tea and coffee. Everyone's clean and dressed and ready to go to the airport, which was going to happen about 10 o'clock in the morning. So we didn't have a lot of time left to go birding. We had a nice passage of Swainson's hawks to say goodbye to us, maybe 100 of them circling over the tower, very close. And we saw our last red-legged honey creeper and our last green honey creeper. And then we saw our scarlet tanager, and we realized we were going to be sending him, following him home to America. And that's the end.